we as a nation.
A candidate for U.S. president visited Aurora recently and echoed the sentiments of a Naperville gun shop owner who filed a motion to block Illinois' assault weapons ban that went all the way to the Supreme Court, which denied his request. Bureau Gravity's production studio hosted Texas businessman Ryan Binkley and his supporters, eager to hear about his presidential campaign and his views on controversial issues like gun regulations. Do you think the mass shooting problem is an epidemic?
You know, I think that right now we're just in a time and place where there's just so much evil. You know, I don't think it's an epidemic. I think that, you know, we're at a place where there's just something that we have to lead through. We have to pray through. We have to get wisdom on. And I don't know the exact answer other than I feel like that we as a country have got to stand together and start getting in people's lives. You know, Jesus had this comment. He would say, you go love your neighbor. Many times we're asking the government to go take care of a situation. This is going to be involved in us knowing people, being in people's lives. And I think when we do, we can solve these problems together.
The Gun Violence Archive shows Binkley's home state of Texas as the site of 19 of the 200 mass shootings that injured or killed more than 3 people per incident in the United States through May 21st of this year.
When someone is using a gun to commit those atrocities, there's got to be ways for people to have to go through some sort of a check to get a gun like you have to do with a license. Yes, there's background checks, but what about training and other ways that we can make sure that guns aren't getting into the hands of people that shouldn't have them?
No, I understand that thought. First of all, Allen, Texas is 5 miles away from my hometown, McKinney, Texas. Our church at Richardson, our office, Richardson, Texas, is just 5 minutes up the road. When this happened last week, we were in church on Sunday the very next day, and we could feel it in our congregation, just the pain, the emotions, and people concerned. So my prayers and thoughts are with all the families that were affected. It's likely thousands of kids and friends and family. This is something that's ongoing now. We have, this happening over and over again. And many times the easiest thing to do is just look at, okay, what's the easiest thing I can grab? It's kind of like the branches on the tree. I think though it's really the root of the problem though is more deeper than that. And I think it's a spiritual and mental health crisis that we're in. When somebody wants to kill somebody, that's kind of like fentanyl. Fentanyl is already outlawed. Fentanyl is outlawed, but people still want it. And so they're getting it because there's a demand for it. I think if somebody wanted to do something and hurt somebody today, they're going to do that regardless of what kind of weapon it is. I do think we should enforce the laws we have today. I do support, background checks, and it should be done. It should be enforced at every place that they're in law right now. But at the same time, we have to start doing something about the spiritual crisis we're in. I mean, our country's broken. It's broken from a cultural standpoint and a spiritual standpoint. I think it's us turning to God, turning to each other. I think we can use practical wisdom for some of these problems, but at the end of the day, we've got a deep, deep mental health issue problem. I think we need to have resources for people that are struggling. And I believe that we need to be in people's lives more. When family members and others know that somebody's going through a crisis moment or they know they're unstable in some ways, we need to be able to connect with them through a church or a counselor or somebody to try and help them get on the right track.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says a record 48,830 people died from gun-related injuries in the U.S. in 2021, a 23% increase since 2019. The federal agency says there were 14.6 gun deaths per 100,000 people in 2021, the highest rate since the early 90s, but below the peak of 16.3 gun deaths per 100,000 people in 1974. 2 decades after that record, Congress passed a 10-year ban on assault weapons, which expired in 2004. President Biden has vowed to reinstate the ban. Gun rights activists say the ban would infringe on the Second Amendment. They worry about who could be targeted by red flag laws that allow family members, police, mental health professionals, roommates, and former dating partners to petition a judge to remove firearms from those they believe pose a threat.
We do hear sometimes about people like this, they're loners. They didn't have anyone in their life.
Right.
They didn't have any connection. And the proximity sometimes that people have to the ability to get the weapon may be affecting their ability to then inflict harm. And you talked about the fentanyl coming over the border and every life matters. So even if the branch of the tree could have some impact, isn't that as important as the root of the tree?
Well, I mean, I understand your question, I understand your point. I mean, I believe, though, in our country, we have a Second Amendment that I'm in strong support of. So we have the right to bear arms. And this weapon is used mainly in sports, mainly in hunting. It's not used for, there's 20 million of these weapons out there. If anybody wanted one, they could get one. So that's the reason I don't think it would do any good for us necessarily to try and, keep them from being purchased in any way. I do think we need to have storage. I think we could have training. I think we should, continue every effort in that. And but I think, again, it's a spiritual and health issue.
We thank you for coming by and sharing your views with us.
Well, thank
and
you.
we thank you for watching. For Talking Cities, I'm Diane Mocha.